Dave Nielsen. I'm the head of community for the AI Alliance, and I work for IBM, but I'm full-time focused on the AI Alliance. And so I'd like to welcome you to our weekly meeting. And today we are focused on, we're here to learn how the RAISE Act affects you, the AI Alliance Association, and some of your peers. But before we get to that, I'd like to briefly tell you a little bit about the AI Alliance. So as many of you know, I think some of you are joining from our New York-based meetup network, perhaps from a newsletter we sent out to New York-based folks. We also sent this out to our broader network because we think this topic impacts obviously folks in New York, but also this is a topic that is I think important to a lot of us. We had a similar topic that we discussed in California last year. So definitely something for more of us to learn about. But first, I'm going to tell you about, for those who are new, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the AI Alliance and the AI Alliance Association. So the AI Alliance is focused on lots of topics. We bring together folks to build the open future of AI. This basically means that we are talking about subjects that are important for openness and the ability for companies to use AI, especially with open source software, and not just software, but also open practices, and just being open about what you're using and how you use it. And some of the projects that we work on, for example, are the Open Trusted Data Initiative, which is a new project that we are getting ready to launch, where you can find out where the data that you are about to use came from and what has happened to it since it was collected, so that you know that you can confidently use that data. We have a lot of other focus areas, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that right now. I want to move on to our topic, but I just want to let you know that if you're interested in finding out more about the AI Alliance, please check out the link on the page here at thealliance.ai, and we have lots of information there about different working groups, and you can also check us out on YouTube. If you look for The Alliance, you should be able to find us. All right, well, with that, I'm going to turn it over now to John Backstance of Meta, and we'll look forward to hearing more about the topic in a few moments.
Great. Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hey, my name is John Backstance. I'm an Innovation Policy Manager at Meta, and we're so grateful to the AI Alliance Association for helping to pull together this important conversation. Also want to say just thank you to all of you for taking your time to dial in. I see a number of familiar names on the list, but also a brand new, bigger community of others that I haven't interacted with in the past. Fantastic to see this kind of interest. If you take away one thing from this meeting, is to please scan this QR code so that you can learn how you can get involved, especially for those of you who are in the New York AI community. We want to hear from you how you may want to include your voice in the discussion about the RAISE Act. We're going to take the next hour to talk through what that means and what this menu of options looks like. But please scan this QR code, find ways to get involved. So now getting into our agenda, to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking through today. Really the foundation of this meetup is an information briefing about the RAISE Act. This is legislation that will have an impact on the New York AI community if it's signed into law. I want to emphasize that the goal of this meetup is really about education. It's meant to be informative about what the RAISE Act is, the impact that our briefer Alvaro sees, and ways to get involved. This meetup is not designed to be a debate. So just as we kind of approach this and learn, we appreciate that there may be a number of different perspectives here, and that's great. And I'm glad we have a chance to talk through it, but really want to kind of center ourselves in information, education, and learning here. So we'll have that information briefing from Alvaro. Then will be followed by me kind of reviewing that list of menu of options for how you can get involved. And then really what I'm most excited about is to hear from a New York founding engineer, Dominic, who's from the startup VecFlow based out of Manhattan. And he's going to share why his company, his startup, is speaking up about the RAISE Act. So really looking forward to that discussion. And then once we have a chance to go through that programming, we will open up to Q&A and have a discussion. So we're really looking forward to that. So you can go ahead to the next slide, and I'll hand off to Alvaro, who's also from Meta.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Alvaro Marañón. I'm with Meta. I'm a privacy policy manager working on AI legislation regulation. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak about a pressing and timely issue shaping the future of innovation in New York. So what is the RAISE Act? On June 12th, the New York legislature passed the Responsible AI Safety and Education, known as the RAISE Act. The Act establishes uniquely broad risk assessments, downstream reporting, and extensive disclosure requirements for large developers of frontier models. Currently, the governor is assessing whether to sign or veto the Act or send it back through the legislature through chapter amendments. If signed into law, the Act would take effect within 90 days. So to begin, I think it'd be useful to kind of cover some of the key concepts in this proposed legislation and this past legislation. So the Act would impose obligations upon large developers of frontier models. To be considered a large developer, you would have to train at least one frontier model and spend over 100 million in aggregate compute costs to train frontier models. To be considered a frontier model, the model would have to be either trained using more than 10 to the 26 flops and 100 million in compute costs, or produced through a process known as knowledge distillation and hit at least 5 million in compute cost. Taken together, this would mean any model captured or developed, deployed, or operated in the state of New York would be captured, as the Act only provides a narrow exception for academic research. So that means research and development or internal uses would no longer be out of scope. For captured developers, it creates significant burdens for open source, especially in the open source context. An open source developer would be expected to anticipate, evaluate, and potentially mitigate a wide range of potential downstream harms stemming from any use of frontier models or distilled models from that teacher model under a subjective unreasonable risk standard. A covered open source developer would also be prohibited from developing a frontier model if it would create an unreasonable risk, which is undefined, of causing a critical harm. And a frontier covered open source developer would also be expected to implement downstream and reporting within 72 hours for a safety incident, which includes unauthorized access or use of released model weights. Notably, the Act does not differentiate between released and unreleased model weights for this critical safety reporting downstream. And for violations, the Attorney General can issue steep penalties, up to 10 million for the first violation and up to 30 million for any subsequent violations. And so we go back to the main point. What is at risk for the New York open source community? At a high level, we think the main concern is the availability of and access to US developed AI models. If signed into law, the Act will create a hostile regulatory environment for open source models, which will limit the optionality for them to be available for developers in the state and result in a limited set of proprietary or non-US models. Regarding the availability and access to US models, given that the scoping would have captured distilled models, an open source developer under this regime would face untenable liability for downstream misuse or conduct. The Act does not differentiate between a downstream developer or any third-party actors who may take the model and make material modifications in ways that is not foreseeable at the time. On AI research, while university-driven AI research is indispensable in progressing this space, this Act will have a chilling effect on private-led research, as the restrictive exception would only apply to universities. So in-house labs that led to the result of the transformer breakthroughs would kind of be curbed. The result here is that private AI labs may incentivize to relocate their R&D outside the state of New York to avoid the uneven regulatory burden and potential liability of conducting AI activities within the state of New York. As previously discussed, this would apply to any AI model, frontier model, developed whole in part in the state of New York, so this could have a great chilling effect. This will have a profound impact on AI research within the state of New York, as industry labs, which have access to custom compute infrastructure and which can leverage product and research integrations, are no longer possible to do so in this environment, as it would only be limited to academics. So going forward, if signed into law, New York would be home to regulatory AI framework that puts New York developers community at risk of falling behind, as they lose the opportunity to build on the latest and most capable models. The Act will disproportionately hurt in-state developers, stifle innovation, and limits AI potential to drive economic growth and creation. The act will not meaningfully advance AI safety, and it would penalize well-resourced US AI developers investing in New York while excluding foreign developers, not because of model performance but solely on the basis of expenditure on compute. The act is purposely under-inclusive, and it would not a wide range of foreign-based models, which would mean they would be free to develop and deploy their models in the US and abroad without any of the meaningful transparency we've seen in US-driven model development. As a result, we believe that New York's economy, this will have a massive impact on New York's AI economy, given the current investment in the state and transnational nature of US model development. This will curb the access to and ability to open source in the state, given the downstream liability and the unintended consequences this will have on US global competition. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alvaro. And thanks again, everyone, for kind of showing up with us. If you're joining a little bit later, wanted to welcome you because today we're talking about a really important topic of the RAISE Act in New York that, as Alvaro just shared, will have a really significant impact on the AI community in New York if it's signed into law. And so for those of you who want to get involved, especially if you're in New York, want to call on everybody. Like, if you do one thing in this hour during this meetup, scan this QR code, and that'll give you the opportunity to speak up to us at the AI Alliance Association about how you'd like to get involved. This could be just a range of different kind of levels of involvement, meaning that we're not asking everybody to do everything on this list. Really, like, one of the most fundamentally important ways that we can kind of create a well-informed discussion about the RAISE Act is to speak about the very tangible, real-world open source AI use cases that many of you are already creating. We found that being able to point to these real-world use cases helps to kind of ground the discussion in the reality and help to educate what this technology is, and especially why it's valuable. So on this forum, you'll see that you have an opportunity to simply check a box to say, like, yes, if you are building with open source AI models, if your company uses them, and a short description of what that is, that will make it easy for us to then point back to real world examples. And it could be as simple as that. But there are ways to get even more involved if that's something that you're motivated to do. And you'll see in the form, if you scan that QR code, there's ways to just check the box to say that maybe you want to write a letter to the governor's team, or there may be we call them grassroots letters, where maybe an organization like the AI Alliance Association or others may circulate letters that look for others in New York's AI community to sign on. That's an option too. So writing letters, signing letters, and if you want to get even more involved, and we'll hear in a moment from a New York-based startup, Vecflow, who's on this path, publishing something publicly to social media is a really lightweight way to kind of get your voice out there, but something that as just the AI Alliance Association is in these discussions with government officials and the governor's team, being able to point to any public posts just makes it easy to show real world examples, again, that like allows you to authentically be a part of the discussion at pretty in a lightweight way that doesn't really require any training, mostly just a reaction to what your feelings are about the RAISE Act and how it would impact you and your business or your research and innovation. Even more involved, like, there are opportunities to publish op-eds. That's an opinion piece that New York media may be looking to include to bring in different perspectives on the discussion around the RAISE Act. And this is something that our team at the AI Alliance Association, like, we can help folks along with that. This is something that a lot of our teams have experience helping with, but we'd love for this to be in your authentic voice, sharing your perspective. And candidly, it's a good way to bring awareness for your own innovation and your own work. Because again, the foundation of a lot of these discussions is helping to educate the governor's team and others in the policy discussion, just educating them about what New York's AI community is already doing. So it's a good way to get visibility on your work. And then lastly, again, you could do all these things or any one of these, Public speaking opportunities are a really cool way to kind of get your face, get your voice out there. And that could mean speaking to the press. Maybe there's opportunities for direct engagement, and really we'll kind of follow the lead of this community in terms of the level of interest. But it's something that the AI Alliance Association could do to help bring your voice directly into the discussion. So please scan this QR code. As I mentioned, it could be as simple as telling us about what you're already building. It could be writing letters, signing letters, making a public social media post, writing an op-ed that we could help with, and finding public speaking opportunities. So thanks so much. Scan this QR code. We'll come back to this as well, and we'll share a link after the meetup. But with that, let's talk to Dominic from VecFlow about why VecFlow is speaking up in this discussion. And Alvaro, maybe we could stop sharing our screen here. And Dominic, I'll welcome you onto the screen, and I'll stay on with you. We'll have a quick conversation. But Dominic, tell us about VecFlow and why you're getting involved in the discussion about the RAISE Act.
Sure. So, hello everyone. I'm Dominic. I'm a founding engineer at VecFlow. We're a legal tech AI company in New York. And we're focused on building AI tools that help lawyers work more efficiently. And we're just a bit concerned about how the RAISE Act may impact startups like us. So as we've just gone over, the bill defines large developers as companies spending at or above $100 million in aggregate. So this means over the entire lifetime. And so even as a smaller company creating domain-specific models like us, as we grow, we fear there may come a day where we hit this threshold, and it could come very soon, where we face the same burdens as large companies like Google or OpenAI. But really more troubling and more time sensitive is the distillation provision. So any model that's produced by applying knowledge distillation to a frontier model, as we just discussed, it becomes regulated. So even if that level of cost is just 5 million, and really that's one of our very important methods of building these specialized legal tools is model distillation. But with this act, we become liable for preventing critical harm from uses that we can't control. So we just feel that this makes a huge burden and causes us to have to almost forecast the future, and it might lead providers to prohibit New York companies from using their models, and this would cut off a lot of the open source AI that we depend on to build our tools and make our smaller models better. So we just in closing, we just want to say that the bill risks pushing AI startups to other states, and we really do want to innovate responsibly in New York, but we feel like the RAISE Act misses the mark there a bit.
Dominic, that was very well said. Thank you for sharing all that. And it really is powerful to hear how it would impact you, the startup, and something that you've been building in New York. Wanted to kind of also get your thoughts on what's your advice for other startups, other researchers, maybe data scientists out there who may share your concerns. I just shared that kind of menu of options of ways to get involved. I know VecFlow's planning to make something as simple as like a post to LinkedIn or something. Can you share a little bit about like what's motivating the way you're speaking up, and what's your advice for others who may be wanting to do the same but might not have like necessarily a lot of training but has an important perspective? What's your advice for them?
Yeah, I think if you have a platform in which you can speak on this, it's important to come out and kind of explain these unintended consequences of this act. And specifically, if you're a smaller company and you're just using AI as part of your workflow, in a lot of cases, you may not be directly affected by this act, but you would be affected by its large impact on just AI innovation in general in New York. But for us specifically, why we want to come forward is because we experience a lot of difficulty already competing in this AI space as a smaller company. And this tool, this distillation tool, and also the training of our own model has been very helpful for us. The big model that we're training right now, we're not super concerned about this bill's effect on it, but the distillation provision is something that we would hit pretty quickly if we continue to train the way that we're doing. And so I think if either of those two buckets are something that your company falls into, it will be worthwhile to speak up and just kind of explain that to the wider public.
Great. Dominic, thanks for sharing your perspective, sharing that advice. We're looking forward to including you with our Q&A too. So for those in the audience who may want to have questions for Dominic and learn more about Vecflow, I'd really encourage you all to just check out their business too. We're really proud of what they're building with open source models and just contributing to New York's AI community. With that, Alvaro, if you could just briefly bring the screen back. We're going to transition back. We're going to transition into our Q&A. And the way we're going to do this, I think this may be the AI Alliance Association's first time doing a Q&A with these meetup tools. So bear with us. If you could go back one slide real quick, there's a meeting tools like button. If you're on desktop, and I believe you should be able to find it on mobile too, it kind of looks like 9 dots. If you click on that, there's a Q&A tab, and from there you can raise questions. I see we've already got one in the queue, and we can maybe jump into that. But I want to encourage you to use that Q&A tool for the next more than half hour. We're happy to hang in there with you and answer questions. But whether it's questions for Alvaro about his information briefing on the RAISE Act. It could be questions for me about just that kind of menu of options of how you can get involved, and questions for Dominic too. And we're just so grateful for his share in Vecflow's perspective. So we also elicited some questions before the meetup. We'll see if we can get to those, but really want to prioritize what we've got here in the queue. I see we've got one from Brian Green, who asks, Alvaro, I think this is maybe a good one for you. Actually, Dominic, you mentioned this as well. It's about distillation. Can you explain the distillation provision more?
Yep, absolutely. And thank you for that timely question. So the knowledge distillation is part of the hook to capture what the Act would consider frontier model. So it uses 2 proxies, one based on compute costs, which has known deficiencies, and a way to capture this, they also tag any model that's distilled off the teacher model that would use at least 5 million in compute costs. And the risk here is that for a covered open source developer, they would be expected to anticipate, evaluate, and mitigate potential downstream misuse by any user or third party for the frontier model and any models distilled off that teacher model under a subjective unreasonable risk standard. So part of this risk is that if the model would pose an unreasonable risk, again, which is not defined, a covered developer would be prohibited from releasing this model. And so this creates a chilling effect upon the ability to share this important tool for the open source ecosystem. Knowledge distillation is an incredibly useful process, as we just heard, but it would create a untenable liability risk if you had to assess all potential ways this could be used downstream.
Thanks, Alvaro. And Dominic, I really appreciate your mentioning the distillation provision as well. Could you expand on kind of Vecflow's perspective if you're using distillation, or if you may want to use distillation for your business model? Love to hear your thoughts. And also just for the audience, we've got our how to get involved slide back on, and we're hoping you'll scan that QR code if you're inspired by what you're hearing here. But most of all, excited to hear from Dominic and Alvaro. Dominic, what are your thoughts on the on distillation?
Right. Yeah. So I think that it is a good point that a smaller model derived from a frontier model could potentially carry similar risks, and it could even be pushed in a certain direction. And I think that that's something that we really should consider with regulation. But I don't think that it's fair to subject these distilled models to the same level of regulation as the frontier model. And so for us, we use this learning technique to take these larger frontier models and to create more efficient and more specialized versions of them for legal use. And so we have a few of them that we use under the hood at Vecflow and on the Oliver platform. And they are expensive to produce. We haven't reached the $5 million threshold yet, but I think that it's something that we would approach in the future pretty quickly, especially if we end up combining or using one model for more than one use purpose. Then those numbers start to accelerate And so I think that this is a really useful technique to avoid excessive compute costs when you're running a lot of legal workflows like we are. Having these smaller models do tasks where they're much easier than having a large model, and they can even run locally, and we can avoid API costs. It's a very useful technique for a company like ours. And I just think that this level of regulation would be something that we really could not afford to cooperate with at this time. So I think that's my explanation. I think that frontier models are important to take a look at, but once they're distilled, I think that the main step should come before that, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. All right, very just thoughtful answers from both of you. I appreciate that. We've got a couple more coming in. This is great. This one, Alvaro, may be more for you. So we've got a question about a company that may be based in New York, but it's developing elsewhere. Their data center maybe is elsewhere, it's not New York. Would they have to report the compute cost to New York in this regulatory scheme? And is that explained clearly in the bill?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question, Brian. Thank you for that. So on the scoping, it would. The act is quite purposely broad in the sense that it would capture any work, development, deployment, or operations in New York towards a frontier model. So that means if an open source developer could restrict access to the models in New York, and if any, let's say one employee did any adjacent work about the model in the New York vicinity, it would remain in scope. So there's no ability to, it would pretty much create that untenable liability that if you would do any private research or in-house research or collaborations, which again are not exempt under this bill, would be in scope. On the actual compute, that actually is unclear. The Act provides a definition of compute that isn't seen elsewhere, and it's not clear how this would be transparent. We've had concerns about foreign-based developers who are not as transparent in their compute costs, and there are deficiencies with this proxy which have been identified in the California Working Group report on this issue space. So this is a great question, and we hope there's further clarity from the sponsors around how to assess this.
Thanks, Alvaro. Dominic, I'm curious, is Vecflow, do you do all your development in New York, or do you have any that's happening outside the state right now?
Yeah, so we do business in other states, and we have employees in other states, but all of our engineering work is done in New York. And that was a recent change. So we were in San Francisco for a while, but we came to New York about a year ago now. So we're all the engineers are here in the city.
Great. So you're bringing investment from California into New York, and now it sounds like you've got some concerns about what this regulatory environment might look like.
Yeah.
Very cool. So good questions. All right. So those are two back-to-back good questions from Brian Green. Thank you, Brian. Next, Lucas Roberts asks, this is a question about open source software. So does the Act apply to open source software development using AI models for code generation of open source software? What do you think, Alvaro?
Yeah, that is a good question. I would say it does not directly cover open source software, but the concern here is around the use and the downstream risk mitigations. So a covered developer would have to assess how any downstream actor may use their foundation model in combination with existing technologies, whether it be other open source software, other products or services, and it would eventually, if it ever was used in a way that result in a critical harm. So in that sense, it would create a technically infeasible obligation for developer to assess how all the possible ranges that open source software could be used, which again creates concern about open sourcing any of these models in the future.
Great. Thank you. And Dominic, anything you want to add on that one?
No, I think that's very correct.
Okay. So I know we've got Santana looking after the chat. We've had a few questions come in. There is one that I'll pull from our kind of pre-registered questions, but also want to ask the audience, keep them coming. I hope you're able to find that Q&A tool. If you find this kind of meeting tools button on the user interface for Google Meet, from there you'll see a Q&A tab. Really encourage you to ask questions. These have been really helpful, so please keep them coming. So Alvaro, our pre-raised question is about documentation, some of the other requirements. So will the RAISE Act require documentation, audits, or explainability features from open source developers who don't have the infrastructure of large tech companies?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, that is a great point. I would say the Act is not so much focused on the infrastructure or other similar metrics that would be useful to regulate what capabilities we're looking for or what types of thresholds, but actually just simply on expenditure. So it would not really, it's kind of silent on the effect of like actual measurable metrics. So when you're looking for CBRN or chemical, nuclear, biological weapons, you look at downstream availability of resources or other downstream context considerations when you're trying to assess these risks. This bill does not really address that concern. So it would capture any open source developer so long as it hits that compute threshold or that expenditure threshold, which Dominic mentioned earlier, is an aggregate. So it's not focused on infrastructure or other more tangible metrics.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Alvaro. Dominic, feel free to weigh in there if there's anything else you wanted to address as it related to any of the infrastructure piece.
Yeah, I think that aggregate point is very important because as time goes on, I think more and more people get looped into these effects of this act, and I think that right now it may be hard to predict how much a company may spend on things like that, but it is inevitable at a certain point that those numbers are reached.
Got it. All right. All right. Looks like we've got another from Brian Green. Let me kind of read through this. All right. It sounds like there are a lot of potential unintended consequences of this act. Some are discussed here, but it sounds like there could be a lot more. Have you created an FAQ of the consequences of this act? So what do you think, Alvaro? Have you seen any resources that are out there? Brian, thanks again for this great question. So just in terms of like the unintended consequences, what resources or materials could we point people to, or do we have ideas of what we may be able to provide? Dominic, I'd love to hear your input too after Alvaro on what would be useful to you. But go ahead, Alvaro.
Yeah, another great question, Brian. I think this actually captures the essence and challenges with this legislation. It is only encompassing it's state legislation. It's only representative of one equity and one issue space of New York. It's not reflective of all the equities and considerations of the rest of the states or the larger United States. There are national security concerns, there's global competition, and other equities that should be assessed, which aren't. And this is kind of the issue here. It's under-inclusive. And so we would urge for more people to speak up. I know I saw some comments that people who are based in Philadelphia and other states, and kind of understanding how this would affect you across the ecosystem. There are comparative and competitive advantages across the states, and any legislation that will develop and outline the future of frontier legislation in the US should be really representative of all the risks, all the equities and interests across the domain, especially open source. And for future, we would happily provide further additional materials and also answer any additional questions after the briefing as well.
Thanks, Alvaro. Dominic, have you seen any of these resources? I'm curious what, and if not, like what would you find useful? Brian mentioned an FAQ. What are ways that we can help raise awareness of these important issues?
Yeah, I think that would be good actually. I haven't seen those resources, but yeah, just a general list or maybe some kind of handout style thing would be useful. I mean, there are a lot of unintended consequences, and I think it's difficult when you're just reading the bill or reading writings about it to come to those conclusions yourself. And so having it laid out like that's really important. I don't think that, like, the thing that I've been talking about, this whole distillation cascade, and also just like how those prices are aggregate may not immediately stand out to people when reviewing it. And so having it laid out in that format would be useful.
And something that I've seen that I find really helpful is the AI Alliance Association actually has a public statement that they've shared on the AI Alliance website that kind of lays out in simpler terms what some of these unintended consequences would be. And so we're just so grateful for the AI Alliance Association doing that. It looks like Dave's maybe shared that in the chat. Thank you, Dave. This is a great example of how we hope that this discussion is really just the beginning of this dialogue with New York's AI community, with the broader open source AI community, because we want to hear what resources are helpful to you so that we can empower you, but most of all, empower you to include your voice directly in the conversation. So that's very helpful. Want to pause for a moment. Want to ask everyone again, use that Q&A tool to raise questions for us. Also, this I think is a good moment for Dave, especially if there are late joiners. Could you say a word about the AI Alliance? You mentioned how to get involved. Alvaro, maybe you could go back to that AI Alliance slide briefly. And Dave, could I invite you to just kind of give a re-up on your description of what the AI Alliance Association is about?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yes, so for those of you who are new and are unfamiliar with the AI Alliance, we have a variety of topics that we discuss on a weekly basis. We have various working groups that meet, and we have projects that we work on. Primarily what we're doing is we are encouraging the use of open source and AI, and that's not just in open source software. It could also mean working in the open, or just simply being transparent about what you're doing or what you're using or what you're sharing. So for example, we have a project we're working on called the Open Trusted Data Initiative. And this is a good example of why we created this initiative. Is there's a lot of data out there that companies need or want to use for their AI projects. But it's not always clear where that data came from or what has happened to it since it was collected. And so some companies don't feel comfortable using data that they otherwise would be able to use, just simply because they just don't know where it came from. So the goal of the Open Trusted Data Initiative is to create we call it a card. It's a document that simply describes where the data came from. Was the data collected with a license that you can use, and what has happened to the data once it is collected. So these are the kinds of projects that we work on to help companies use data in their AI, and we have other projects as well. One other one I'll mention is we are getting ready to launch the Open Agent Lab, which is, again, it's about transparency and helping you develop agents in ways that your company can use. Where you understand what they do, where the data came from, how the models work, etc. So anyway, if you're interested in finding out more, you can go check out thealliance.ai. You can see the link on the slide here. And we also have a GitHub repo if you are interested to find out more about our projects. I'll put the link in actually, Tim, if you don't mind putting a link in the chat, but it's at github.com/the-ai-alliance. Thank you.
Dave, fantastic. And yeah, just big shout out to Tim and Santana and everyone helping to make this meetup possible. Appreciate all the engagement in the chat. And we've got some more good questions that have come in. So Dave, thank you for that. Alvaro, I'll ask you to go back to that how to get involved slide, please. And all right, we've got a few here. So we'll start picking up the pace. Thanks everyone, keep them coming. Next question is from Zion, who asks, would it be more effective to focus this legislation on holding users of AI accountable for harm rather than placing the full burden on developers? So Alvaro, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for a fantastic question. And so understanding effectiveness, I think it'd be really important to understand that and recognize that we're only one voice. Meta is only one voice in this larger ecosystem. And so if you want to meaningfully create frameworks around frontier legislation, it should account for all the actors in the ecosystem and who is best suited at each stage. So this means that your foundation model developers, our providers, downstream developers, deployers of these actual systems, and then each critical choke point, understanding what are the limitations, what are the expectations around what good actually means in this space. We're only one voice, and we'd really appreciate any framework that looks around and asks your voices, the actual open source developers downstream, what challenges are you facing, what capabilities are you encountering, or barriers, and this is a way you can actually meaningfully advance in this space, because the overarching issue with this bill is that it presumes a lot of science that isn't there yet. It presumes there are measurable benchmarks there. It presumes there is scientific consensus on what it means to be an unreasonable risk or a reasonable risk. It doesn't account for deployment context or the marginal risk standard. And end of the day, it just uses poor proxies for model capabilities that are actually not tied to real risk.
Great. Alvaro, I'm going to ask a really great follow-up question from Zion, and essentially that same topic. And then Dominic, I'd love to give you a chance to weigh in as well. But so the follow-up is, thank you, Zion, for this question. Is there a risk that in trying to make AI safer, we might unintentionally limit innovation or create barriers for responsible developers?
Thank you for the follow-up question. That's fantastic. I think that's a really good flag. The opportunity cost of getting this wrong is really important and not something that has often been discussed. When signatories of the Seoul Commitments on Frontier AI Safety signed that pledge, they committed to outlining their general framework for addressing this issue space of frontier AI legislation. But going forward, we don't believe this will meaningfully advance AI safety. It provides vague standards for risk. And as we previously mentioned, it would actually exclude a lot of similar capable models simply based on expenditure. DeepSeek's R1 would be out of scope, and they would be free to deploy and release these models without any of these transparency frameworks and metrics that we already do provide for similar US-based models.
Great. Thanks, Alvaro. And Dominic, you've spoken so well on this already. I want to give you a chance to address Zion's questions as well. So, Dominic, what are your thoughts about would it be more effective to focus legislation on holding users of AI accountable for harm rather than placing the full burden on developers? And is there a risk that by trying to make AI safer, we may be unintentionally limiting innovation or creating barriers for the responsible developers? What are your thoughts, Dominic?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Alvaro just said about the thinking at an ecosystem level is really important. And the RAISE Act, I think it's really important to be focused on AI safety and to think about doing it correctly. And the problem that we have at Vecflow is really that this act is very focused singularly on these frontier models and downstream effects of those. And I think that those consequences cascade in a way that is probably not ideal for smaller developers and people working with these models. I think it's important also to note that there is agency in the way that people deploy these models and use them. For the most part, these models have good guardrails. And it's very important to ensure that those guardrails stay up and that alignment is a priority. But I think that there is responsibility on the end user as well. It's probably harder to regulate that at this type of level. But I guess like my main point is we need like staggered levels of regulation. One at the highest end where these frontier models, these very expensive base models, are being considered, and then downstream effects like distillation, smaller models, and the open source community in general should have a level of regulation that is easier to comply with for smaller teams and smaller budgets.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. And what I've heard from you and what I've heard from a number of other open source AI developers is that responsible AI is just good business too. Like you want to, especially as you're dealing maybe with sensitive, like legal, confidential information, of course, you're going to like nail it better than everybody else. That competition is really reinforcing a lot of good behavior. And we just appreciate you're like making those statements too, that it's not just like opposing a bill, but it really is like leaning into the responsible innovation in a way that's like just good for everybody. All right. So there is a Dave, there's an AI Alliance question. I'll bring you back for while Dave addresses this question. We've still got more than 10 minutes. Want to encourage everybody use that meeting tools button to find the Q&A tab to raise more questions. These have been fantastic. But Dave, the question for you comes from Regina. It's about how to join the AI Alliance Association. Is there a cost to membership, and is it a nonprofit?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, well, to answer the second question, it is a nonprofit. Thank you for asking. And we have a membership that is based on organizations that want to join, and we also allow individual members to join. Neither today have a cost. However, there is talk of that, but today there is not a cost for either one. However, you do need to register and be accepted. It is I would say that organizations, there is a bar that must be met, and I don't have the criteria handy with me right now, but usually it has to do with aligning objectives with the AI Alliance, making sure that the projects that we have are projects that the organization would like to contribute to. We are really heavily dependent upon contributions, and I don't mean money, I mean by personnel, people, employees, contributing to our projects, participating in our projects. So we just want to make sure that companies that join are joining for the right reasons. And the same goes for our individual contributors. If you'd like to be an individual contributor, you can apply to be that way. And again, it's the same. I would say it's easier as an individual contributor to show that you have something to contribute just by picking a project and then participating in it. So one way to find out more about this is to join our weekly call. We have it at the same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. It's usually every single week. And you can find out more about that by going to, for some of you who joined via our Meetup network, you can join that way. That's the IBM Developer Meetup Group, which is in many cities around the world. And then also you can join by going to thealliance.ai and click on community, and that tab will provide multiple ways in which you can join, including the two that I just described. I'll put a link in the chat just so you guys have easy access. Thank you for asking.
All right. So thank you, Regina. Very, great to see the interest, not only in get involved in the discussion around the RAISE Act, especially for those in New York's AI community, but for everybody. Really grateful for the interest in potentially joining the AI Alliance and the AI Alliance Association. So want to just kind of take a moment too, as we wait for more questions, to remind everyone that scan this QR code. If you're interested, sign up for how you may want to volunteer to get involved. We are just so grateful that if you're a company like Vecflow and you're using open source AI models, even just telling us what models you're using and how is really helpful for the AI Alliance Association as we think about finding ways to educate and create a better informed discussion with New York lawmakers and other lawmakers about what the technology is and why it's valuable. And then also, I see we've got a shout out from Lucas Roberts in the Q&A section, who's just mentioned a good book to read. We appreciate what resources are helpful to you. Lucas is someone who has made his own social media post, kind of calling on the governor to veto the act and speaking up about why, for him personally, the RAISE Act is problematic. And really just want to reinforce how it could be as simple as just making a social media post, sharing something publicly that we can point back to, that not only serves as a way to educate people in government, but also just serves as a good example to those around you who maybe aren't on this meetup. But we hope that New York's AI community can really internalize the fact that the RAISE Act is important to them because it's going to impact your research, your work, maybe your startups. So thank you to Lucas. Thank you to Dominic and Vecflow for the ways that you're being a part of the discussion. And we'd encourage you to use that form to help sign up. I want to go. We've got less than 10 minutes now. I got another question from Zion. How will third-party audits be conducted, and who determines whether an AI model poses an unreasonable risk? Alvaro, I think this is an important kind of distinction on the audit piece. Can you weigh in on this one, please?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So first part on the audit, the act as passed by the legislator was amended, and it removed the third-party audit provisions. which is a positive, and we are appreciative of those removals. But there are still underlying concerns that could pave way for an audit regime that would subject any model to pre-deployment or design specifications under a clear subjective standard. Specifically, the actual safety and security protocol still requires a cover developer to conduct specific testing procedures that could be replicated and evaluated downstream. And the reality is, as you flagged, there is no clear standard as what is reasonable or unreasonable in the space, and this would all be under the discretion of an attorney general for and after the fact. We benefit from safety developments now, and let's say for manufacturing for vehicles, that seatbelts are obviously quite beneficial, but that was due to the wrong testing at the federal level and a creation of a federal safety board and agency, and we benefit from hindsight. Right now, it's not clear what is needed in this space, and it would be under the discretion of the AG.
Great. Thanks, Alvaro. Dominic, is that something you'd like to weigh in on as well, just in terms of the unreasonable risk piece? What does that mean to VecFlow?
Yeah, I think it's hard to work around that when those terms aren't explicitly defined. And obviously, it's something that every company should take seriously and making sure that they're developing responsibly. But we do need guidelines in order to do that, and we don't want to fall into a situation where we didn't foresee something being considered in that way or used in that way. And I think saying more is always important, and better than saying less. And when you're dealing with this type of regulation.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And we've got another question from Zion. Zion and Brian are power users of our Q&A tool. We're grateful for everybody's engagement. Thanks for all these good questions. Next question from Zion is, are there any parts of the bill that could serve as a national model, or are they intended only for New York's context? I think this is an interesting dynamic in terms of like, hey, what's happening in New York that's maybe setting it apart from the rest of the country, and how does this impact? We've got the AI community even from outside of New York who's on this meetup. What are your thoughts, Alvaro and Dominic?
Yeah, I'll just take a first pass at this. I think there are parts of this bill that would differentiate New York from the rest of the world. I think specifically the knowledge distillation language. We haven't seen that in other pieces of proposed frameworks or legislation in this space. It wasn't in last year's California Frontier bill. And also the actual definition does not seem to be based on any scientific consensus. It seemed it was quite rushed. So I think that part of the bill hopefully is not replicated elsewhere, as it could actually have a tremendous chilling effect on the open source ecosystem. So I think in that sense, it's quite unique that it would separate New York from the rest of the country.
Thanks, Alvaro. Go ahead, Dominic.
Yeah, I mean I very much agree with that. It's a unique provision in this act, and I do think that all of these use cases should be considered and should be outlined in anything that intends to regulate AI. So I do think that it is a good thing that they are trying to encompass more aspects of AI use cases and development workflows. But obviously, as we discussed today, maybe there's a better way to do that, right? Yeah, I think it's a good step in the right direction to consider not just the biggest players in the space, but also smaller developers and end users. So I think if in the direction of a national model or just kind of like a guideline of AI regulation, having a better understanding of the entire ecosystem and who is responsible for what in that would be great in a national context.
Yeah, and I'd say this is, again, where it's just so important to have active involvement from the New York AI community, the nationwide AI community, in helping to educate what those different layers look like. The downstream actors, so it's not just one discussion about one part of it. I also like what you mentioned, Alvaro, like not only kind of distinguishing New York from a national context, but even like globally, where like you mentioned earlier that like DeepSeek wouldn't necessarily be like in scope for the RAISE Act, meaning that if New York is maybe slowing down due to some of these requirements, it doesn't stop DeepSeek, doesn't stop China or actors around the world. So it's not only like setting New York apart from the country, but really the globe. We've got two more questions here. Maybe it looks like we have time for one more. So Lucas, thanks for jumping into the chat here with a question. Does the act apply to nonprofits as well? I think this is one we can maybe answer pretty quickly, and then we can start wrapping up. But Alvaro, go ahead. How about nonprofits?
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. And the act does apply to nonprofits. The act only exempts accredited universities and within the state of New York. It's quite a narrow exception we haven't seen elsewhere in other frameworks. Generally, they do apply some type of protections for research in this space, but private-led research, but the act does not. So if you hit the thresholds, regardless of profit or nonprofit, you would be in scope.
Great. Alvaro, can I ask you to go back to the how to get involved slide? Dominic, thank you so much for joining this meetup and sharing such thoughtful thoughts up front and your answers in the Q&A. Any final thoughts on your side before we wrap up? And Alvaro, Dave, I'll give you a chance to share final thoughts too before we close out.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as well for having me. I think it was a very productive discussion, and I hope that with this and what we just went over, that people have a better idea of the RAISE Act and what it is, and maybe the direction that we want to kind of push AI regulation in the future, and the important things to consider when we have discussions about that. And I would say, if anyone is in the audience is in a similar situation to us at Betflow, that it would be important to get involved and just kind of make your opinion known, so that there's more smaller players that are in this discussion as well.
Great. Thanks, Dominic, and thank you to Betflow. Alvaro, I'll give you closing thoughts. I'll say a quick word, Dave, and Dave, you can have final word. So go ahead, Alvaro.
Yep. Again, thank you everyone for the opportunity to engage in this space. I guess my closing thoughts would be, first off, I don't believe this law will meaningfully advance AI safety. I think it could threaten and actually detract from ongoing efforts in this space. And then I'd also, end of the day, it's not inclusive or representative of the larger ecosystem. If we're going to get this right, it should be thoughtful. It should be encompassing all different risks and equities at place. It should be representative of all 50 states and all different communities and all different actors.
Great. Well, I'll just echo my thanks, like Dominic and Alvaro in particular. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes. That's Tim, that's Santana, Helen. There's a whole big team across the AI Alliance Association. And Dave, thank you for hosting us and including us with this AI Alliance Association meetup. Last word from me before I hand off to Dave. Scan this QR code. Please fill out the form. Let us know how you want to get involved. We'll share some thoughts over email later too with the link to this form, but would love for this to be the beginning of helping to bring you all into the discussion, not just 1 hour meetup, but going forward. So thank you again, everyone, for all the great questions and engagement. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks for bringing the experts and the community representation. And I just want to do a quick shout out to our community for joining us with over 11 questions and engaging conversation. So thank you for that. I also want to remind you that we do have this meeting on various topics, usually technical topics, on a weekly basis, Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. West Coast. And I put a link in the chat there. If you want to click on it, you can sign up to be reminded. Or for those of you who are already in our meetup group, we send the notifications out that way as well. And so with that, we can sign off. Look forward to more online discussion. You can also find us, by the way, on LinkedIn in the AI Alliance LinkedIn channel. We have some good chats there as well. So see you online and see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks again.